Greetings, everybody. Welcome to another AVA interview. I did check this time. It is singular, not plural. Interview, not interviews. I'm with me with a very special guest today, Kira Buckland, aka. My mind just went blank. Rina-chan? Why did I go blank? Very good to have you with us, Kira.
Thank you.
Now, a brief introduction to Kira in case you're not terribly familiar with her work. Although, if you've played a lot of video games or seen a lot of anime, chances are you've heard her and not known it. 2B from Nier Automata, quite possibly the best game of 2017. Don't argue with me with it. You're going to lose that fight. Uh, she
I'm not
was,
going to fight with you on that.
yeah. Don't even get me started. It's a rabbit hole we're not going to come out of from a long time on all the reasons I love that game. But Kakegurui, for the life of me, kind of the exact name of your character escapes me. I've seen one episode of that.
Mary Saotome. Definitely check it out on Netflix. It's super cool.
Yeah, it is a very cool anime. I've only seen the first episode so far, but it was one of those things where I saw it, and like after the first 5 minutes, I was like, "What the heck am I watching?" And then 10 minutes later, it was, "Why the heck can't I stop watching?"
Yeah, I feel you. It's very bizarre.
Yeah, but very definitely look up the rest of Kira's work. She's done a lot of really cool things over the years. So what we're going to do, as we kind of did with Mr. Sean Chiplock about would have been a month ago from the time the people will be listening to this interview, is the origins and the lessons learned from certain figures in the voiceover industry, in this case, Miss Kira Buckland. So, that being the case, I wanted to briefly kind of go over. First, I guess we could start with the broader question of roughly how long have you been voice acting professionally?
So let's see. I'll go all the way back to just how long I've been doing it in general because, when I first got like my first real roles and stuff, it still took a long time for that to be consistent by any means. But I'll say that I first started doing voice acting just as a hobby and kind of knowing that I wanted to do it in 2004. So I was 16 and a junior in high school. Yay, I'm probably a lot older than a lot of the people who are listening. But yeah, I mean, I got started when I was 16, but I didn't live where the work is, obviously. So I was just kind of doing it on the internet for a lot of years. And then when I was 20, I got my first like real voice acting job because I eventually moved to where the work is and stuff like that. And my first job was an anime called Eirika R16 Virgin Mission that probably nobody's seen except for, of course I got it because I was so excited. Like, I'm in a real anime DVD. But, yeah. And then, I don't know, I kind of like had to take a break for a while because I was just like, it was hard to find day jobs and stuff. It was when the recession was happening. And then I guess I sort of started working more regularly when I moved back again in like 2012. But it still kind of took a while for things to really kick off. So,
16. When you'd say you got your start one way or another. I,
hmm
I think, though, and I know we talked a little bit before we started recording about how it's kind of a different atmosphere or a different culture
oh,
before.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure things have changed, but I think it would be encouraging for a lot of people to hear that, yeah, it's very much possible to, you don't have to wait until you're 30, and way out there until you finally start at least getting some jobs
Of
or
course,
some
but at the
experience.
same time, I want to bring up that it's okay if you are, I'm 30 right now, by the way, and for, if somebody's like my age or even older and they're like, "Well, is it too late to get started?" No, it is absolutely not. There are people who are in this industry who are very well established and they didn't start until our age or even beyond. So, I don't think how young or old someone is should deter them. Just like if you know it's what you want to do, start pursuing it as a hobby and get a feel for it.
Yeah, I think it was Samuel L. Jackson who was he in like his late 30s or his 40s when he finally became an actor, and now of course he's brilliant as an actor. So never too late
Yeah.
to start, right?
Mhm.
So, kind of going briefly over some key moments of your development and your training and your experience before we go into the in-depth, the lessons you've learned and the things you took away. What would you say your first quote unquote big voiceover job would be? Whether it's a video game or a commercial or what you might have done.
Well, I think like the first console video game that I did was Castle Crashers, and I actually recorded that from home and kind of got that, oddly enough, from, just the connections I had with people on Newgrounds at the time. But I mean, it's hard to say, like, I didn't get like really known for any role until just last year when Nier Automata came out, because I mean, that was like kind of the thing where people started actually like knowing who I was and stuff like that. And even though I'd been working for a really long time and done a lot of anime, a lot of video games, and some people knew stuff here and there. Like some people knew me from Danganronpa, and a few people knew me from Love Live, for example. But it was just a huge, like, complete change when Nier Automata came out.
It's really great to see all these things happening for you. I have kind of a brief story to go over on my own. I actually
Yeah.
first got to know you, or rather to kind of follow along with you, on Newgrounds when you were doing machinima and animations and that kind of thing. And back then, I didn't even know your name. I just knew you as Rina-chan. I was like, hey, this Rina-chan lady's pretty darn good. She keeps showing up at a lot of these machinimas, which were like my big thing back then. And I didn't pay a whole lot of attention specifically to where you went and what you did then until I played Xenoblade Chronicles X, and I noticed one of the Avatar voices was Kira Buckland. What has she been doing all these years? What have I missed? Oh, I have to look this
A
up
lot
now.
of people have said that, they're like, oh, what? Like, somebody actually said it in kind of a rude way, like, wow, she's still alive? I was like, okay. Like, they sounded disappointed about that, but.
I guess you can't please everybody. It's the internet. What are you gonna do? But we, for one, are happy that you are still alive, Kira.
Well, thank you. I am happy about that as well.
So, kind of going from the beginning of your first steps in the journey, how you say you through connections and through kind of being at the right place at the right time, you started to get into some bigger acting roles. We're going to move into the lessons you might have learned and some of the struggles you might have had, some of the triumphs you may have had. So, thinking over this history of moving to the city and kind of the changing culture and trying to get ahead, would you say that there were almost times where you may have given up on voice acting, where it became so difficult or the obstacles seemed a little too steep that you became discouraged? And if so, what would have compelled you to keep going through those things? And on that similar note, what would you advise to the people listening to what they might take away from that to keep going through their own personal struggles?
Oh, absolutely. I will say that the thing that kind of will keep you going is knowing that this is what you love doing. This is what you want to do more than anything else for a career. And you're not going to be truly happy. Like, I know if I had gone into, and I've done like all sorts of other jobs and things like that, don't get me wrong, but I knew if I completely gave up on this as a career path and ended up going into like a totally different field as my only job, I would have been miserable because every time I saw something with voiceover, I'm sure I'd be like, I really wish I had done that. Like, I wish I had pursued it. I wish things had worked out. And you'd always feel like, what if? So I just knew that even if sometimes it had to take a back seat to other things in life, which is totally fine, that I didn't want to give up. And the main answer for that is that I just wasn't happy doing anything else. And I've seen well established actors say this all the time, and I absolutely agree, where they say, if there's anything else that you're happy doing, do that, because it's probably going to be easier to make a career out of it. But if you know that acting is the only thing that you want to do, then you kind of have to do it. I mean, that being said, if you're like, if you have another field that you're pursuing that you can make a good living in, and you're like, but I'm kind of interested in voice acting, do it as a hobby, like, totally. But career wise, it's just difficult. And one of the things is because you can't really, at least when you're first starting out, just make a living doing voice acting. I mean, even now, after all these years, I still do other stuff to help pay the bills. Um, it's, you're not like employed by a specific company. You're just a freelance contractor. So you don't have any job security. You can't just go and apply to a specific company and be like, I want to be a voice actor. Will you hire me? Like, you can, try to get on different audition rosters and things like that. But it's not like a a job where you go to school and get a degree and work for a company. It's like you're kind of your own business. And even if you get a lead role, because I see that a lot of times where people get a lead role in something and they're like, cool, I've made it, this is it. It's like, okay, but where's your next job coming from, you know? And you always have to like think of that, I suppose. So I mean, one of my struggles early on was that, well, first off, that I just wasn't very good when I started out. I didn't have, an interesting sounding voice, or anything like that, which is a total myth. Like, you don't need an interesting sounding or unique or funny voice, because you can train your voice to do different things. And also because you're going to end up being sort of cast in things that fit your range vocally. I've totally done things that are just way off from what I normally do, but at the same time, it's like so many people focus on, well, I don't sound like a cartoon character. Cool, like most of us don't, but it's like you can train your voice to sound like all different. So then I was like, I'll train myself to sound like an anime character. Weeb moments. But yeah, so I guess with any skill really, because I mean, even the stuff that I've tried to get into now as hobbies, like makeup and sewing, like I was just really not good when I started. And I think, it's really easy to give up because you're like, well, I'm not good at this. But with anything, you learn and you practice, and that's how you get good at something. And for some people, it may take longer than others. Um, and I guess another challenge was, of course, the whole job thing, because when I first moved out to California, like, I'll be honest, I wasn't totally ready. I thought because I'd gotten in with one place that, I could really get things off the ground. And I did some work with them here and there, but definitely not enough to make any sort of real living, because I just wasn't working enough. I wasn't established or out there enough. And I was totally fine doing other jobs in the meantime, but I couldn't find other jobs because it's when the recession was really bad. So, I gave it like almost 2 years, and I was like, there comes a point where you kind of have to say, like, hey, this isn't working out right now. I'm going to take a couple years off. I'm going to come back to it when things are a little more stable. And that's what I did. And, I'm sure that people said, like, oh, that's failing. That's giving up, whatever. But I have friends who've done the same thing, and I've totally advised them. There is no shame. Like, if you're like, hey, I try to move out, or maybe you move to one area. Like, I have friends who moved out here, got some work, but it wasn't really like super working out for them, and they ended up moving to Texas and doing stuff there. So it's like, if you have to move back home for a few years, or you move to a different market, as long as you make like informed decisions, those are totally valid.
That is kind of a consistent theme I've noticed. There is no one set way to go about growing your career or getting new jobs or getting any sort of forward momentum. It's not, well, A to B to C, or as a Tamara Ryan might say, demo agent money. Unfortunately there is no one set thing. So, like you said, sounds like a good piece of advice. If you have to take a short break from one thing or move to a new location, it's not giving up or defeat. It's simply another phase in the battle plan.
Yeah, and I have a huge post over at a forum I admin called the Voice Acting Club, which kind of goes into depth on, why there's no one set path. I mean, there's certain things that are fundamental no matter what. Obviously, as any actor will tell you, you need some type of training. Some people naturally have good acting instincts, which is great, but even if you're a great, like, actor, you still have to know kind of like the technical side of voiceover and how things work as well. So, everybody needs training, and of course you need like a demo and website kind of stuff. But after that, it's really like, I know so many people who they take classes, they get their like demos done and their website done, and they're like, well, what do I do now? How do I actually start getting work? And that's where things really, it's like, it's difficult,
I remember
because
living
that's
there for
where
many
there's
years.
so many paths. Yeah.
So, would you say at this point that making a living voice acting has sort of become easy for you to some degree? Or is it still kind of a challenge to put bread on the table every day but by getting new paying jobs?
Well, I think of it as sort of a snowball, because for so many years, I was just like, there was no way that I could even imagine at that point making my living doing it. It was kind of, I worked other jobs, I did what I had to. And when I got a voice acting job. I was like, this is really cool. This is like extra. This is, this is what I want to do. But I knew that I couldn't rely on it. And now that I'm like sort of getting to the point where I can kind of rely on it, it's because, I spent all that time building up all these different relationships. And then sometimes you'll work at one place, you'll work with a certain director, and they say, hey, like, I've got something I'm casting at another place that I think you'd be good for. Can you audition for this part? And then you can make some connections there and stuff, but that takes a really long time, and it doesn't happen overnight, especially because a lot of places don't want to take chances on new actors or people they haven't heard of, people they haven't worked with before. They don't know if you're efficient, they don't know if, whatever. And so it took like so long, but now because I have, all these like feelers out at all these different places and all these sources of work, like I have independent clients who hire me from home and stuff. So I'm not just sitting around waiting for one or two places to call me in for an audition, but I know some people who are, and you're going to make yourself miserable when you're at that stage if you're not doing other things. And like I said, even now, like I have another like super part-time, to be fair, but I do have another job that I'm still doing, and you know
You do what you have to.
yeah.
So, about how long would you say it took to kind of get that snowball rolling? It's obviously going to be an uphill battle, and I think even for some voice actors that a lot of people would know, how they still have part time jobs or they still have other things that they do to try and put bread on the table, that it's,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I've met like really well-known actors who say, well, yeah, like I do a lot of acting stuff, but where I make my real money is directing or writing or you know stuff like that. So, I mean, for me, I think it was when things started really picking up, it was probably about 2 years ago. But there wasn't like one specific point where it's like, okay, this is it. It just slowly happens over time. And then, around then, I just sort of started getting enough opportunities to be like, hey, maybe this can be more of a thing.
it's definitely a slow burn. I'm beginning to, based on the people I've talked to and the things I've seen, it kind of occurs to me that it's kind of a rare actor who only acts, you know?
Yeah, a lot of people can do it once they've been in the industry for a really long time, but like, it just takes a while to get to that point. And I see so many people, and some people get lucky, don't get me wrong. Like maybe they get like a really big opportunity on like a long running series and like right out of the gate, and it opens a ton of doors for them. But that is the exception and not the norm, which is why I always tell people like you have to be prepared if you move out here for it to take like a year, maybe even 5 years to really get things rolling.
Yeah, and like you said, to view what you do get as almost a bonus, almost extra, not, oh, I've only got, one or two jobs in this month. Well, it's one or two jobs closer to getting the snowball rolling.
Hmm.
So, kind of a reiteration of I was going to comment on it earlier, but you kind of beat me to it. Uh, if there's anything else you could do, do that. And I did read once from someone who wrote a blog, and the subject in particular was moving to Los Angeles to pursue whatever art or entertainment form, that, just go for it and, darn the consequences and all that. But you, you don't want to get all the way into LA and maybe spend thousands of dollars on demos and lessons and marketing only to discover, holy crap, I don't actually want to do this. What do I do?
Yeah, that's why I tell people to like explore it as a hobby and things like that first.
Which is where I'm sure a voice acting club would be very useful because there are all kinds of things posted
Yeah.
there.
I mean, there's different sites, there's Casting Call and, stuff like that. Kind of the VAC came into play again because other sites were going down, like the VAA went down, which is where like I got my start a million years ago and stuff like that. So we kind of like wanted a place, especially for like indie game producers who needed to cast voice talent and didn't know where to go. Like we kind of just needed to fill that role. Like there are Facebook groups and stuff, but it's like that's not really an efficient way to cast sometimes. So
Yeah. And I think a lot of the people listening to this would be familiar with Voice Acting Club and everything good it has done. But of course, I'll be sure
I hope so.
to refer to it in the article as it goes up.
Yeah, and to help get people casting on there too.
Yeah, and I do like in your format, just kind of an aside, I do like how you have an order to things. So it's not just one casting call that says, "Hey, I need voice actors," and then nothing else. You've got deadlines. You have they have to be very upfront with their information and what they're expecting, because a lot of that you go other places and it's just kind of hard to find.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, especially the deadline thing, because a lot of people don't know better, to be honest. A lot of people who have never worked with voice actors before, never cast a project, they think, well, I'll just cast the first person who sends something in. Like, it's good enough, right? It's a voice, like, it fits. And then they realize, oh, wait, no, like 20 people are sending me their stuff. Oh, wow, these people are even better. And then, there's issues on other sites in the past where then they were like, oh, by the way, the person that I gave the role to, like, right, because they were the first person to send something, oh, yeah, I'm taking that away because I found someone better than that person. That's obviously not fair to them. So it's like, it's just a whole mess if you don't have an order and structure to things. And it's like, yeah, you have to put your email because so many people are like, oh, I don't know, just contact me on Skype. Like, not everybody, people are busy. Not everyone can like add you on Skype, wait for you to get it on. They'll probably forget. So it's like we tell people, have an email, have a deadline, wait to cast till that deadline, put what you need because so many people are like, well, contact me if you're interested. It's a whole site full of voice actors, post what you need, have people read from your script, and that way you can make your best choice. So it's not because we're like, oh, we want to be like, make this hard for people. It's like, we want to make sure you get the best auditions. We want to make sure that our actors don't waste their time, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I look forward to the growth of Voice Acting Club because I do perceive, and I'm not sure what your perspective would be, but I do perceive it's really growing in terms of popularity. Stop it! But it's growing in terms of popularity and forward momentum.
Yeah, I'm glad.
So going back to how you mentioned you had to move to Los Angeles, and first of all, where did you move from?
Alaska. So,
Alaska, a
yeah.
ways away from California.
Hmm.
And exactly, I'm sure the climate's different, of course, but exactly how different would you say Alaska, or rather California, is from Alaska?
Um, I mean, there's more similarities than people might think, to be honest. Um, I guess like getting used to driving down here was kind of hard. I mean, sure, in Alaska we have to get used to driving with ice and snow in the winter, but here it's like it's so crowded. Like there's all the freeways. Like freeways aren't really a thing up there, and just kind of getting used to the freeway system. Getting used to how like crowded it is all the time. Sales tax, because sales tax isn't a thing up in Alaska. Just like the higher cost of living in general, I think is a thing that people have to prepare for because, you know, people are like, oh, I can buy a house if I save up enough money in my hometown. And then they move out here and it's, costing so much just to rent a tiny apartment or whatever. So,
Definitely a different way of life in Alaska, and a lot of other places too. But I have been to Alaska, and it's basically a few cities on the coast, mountains.
yeah, I miss it a lot. I mean, I'm from Anchorage, so it was the city where there was a lot going on, and I do get back several times a year to visit my parents, but and play Pokemon Go and do raids because there's a big scene up there. But
Oh.
yeah,
So, what challenges might you have besides the ones where you said like cost of living and just kind of the the process of adjusting to a different way of life? What sorts of challenges might you have had to overcome going from Anchorage to Los Angeles? Any big hurdles that kind of stick out in your mind?
yeah. Obviously, making a living is the big one. Right now, my side job is at a kitten nursery, which is like, I am a cat lady, so it's really nice. I just work a couple days a week now, and I work at night, and I'm super nocturnal, and because my shifts are late at night, it doesn't interfere with any like auditions or recording that I need to do during the day. But when I first moved here, that opportunity wasn't there and stuff. So I had to do a lot of jobs that I really hated. Like I worked in a couple restaurants and it was just not my thing, no disrespect whatsoever to the people who do that and love it. Like that's great. It just wasn't a good fit for me. But I did that for like a few years. And then I worked in retail, which was like it was okay, but you just get really burned out from dealing with people all the time and I'm an introvert, so stuff like serving, retail, it like gets kind of draining after a while. So now it's like I work with cats and it's really nice. I
A
think it can
kitten
also be
nursery.
hard to, yeah, we work with like orphaned kittens and stuff, and I'm fostering a couple babies from there right now.
Wasn't sure that was even a thing. I'll have to look that up. That sounds like the most adorable job ever.
Yes, definitely. If anybody listening is looking for like a charity to donate to or a place to adopt from, please check out Kitten Rescue. It's really important, saving the lives of cats and kittens who wouldn't have had a chance otherwise. So, I guess like one of the other challenges too was just kind of people move out here and they kind of expect like, okay, I'm going to work now, right? Because I'm where the work is, but you have to find places that are willing to give you a chance. And like I mentioned, a lot of places are very wary about working with new actors. You have to get recommended by, maybe a director or like another high profile actor who works with them. And one, they're not always going to take that recommendation. I've had places where like 4 or 5 people recommended me and it still took them years to like even bother to listen to my stuff. And, some that I never got in with at all. And not, you know what I mean? It's like your friends, like just because you have friends here, a lot of times they don't have the power to get you into places, or if they're not ready, it's a huge risk to recommend somebody. I know like a lot of people who have moved out here have asked me like, oh, can you get me in with this place or this place? And it's like, well, that's not really how it works. Like I'm an actor, like they're not really going to listen to me, especially because I'm not like a veteran and I'm not a director. And also it's like you have to be really, really careful with, not just being like, hey, can I toss you a bunch of people unless it's like somebody that you're friends with who's casting something. So,
Yeah, so temper your expectations before you move.
hmm and definitely like make sure you have a resume of some kind is another thing I tell people, because a lot of people are like, well, but how am I supposed to work if I don't live where the work is? It's like, but there's so much that you can do online now. And yeah, maybe a lot of it doesn't pay great or this or that. But if you can do like original projects and stuff like indie games, you can put on your resume. It gives you experience, a chance to like work with a casting director, to know how to like follow instructions, how to do revisions, how to label your files, like, just like basic like the business side, because that kind of gets back to, mistakes or like things that I wish that I learned way back in the day, is like, because I didn't really have anyone I could talk to who could help me with like the business side. You can take classes and it's like they'll teach you how to act and teach you about voice acting and stuff, but there's not really a lot that focus on like, oh, here's like email etiquette, here's scheduling etiquette, here's how to, you know, do this and this, here's how to discuss rates, like that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
a lot of times I and other people I know, because I just talked to another actress about this today, we had to learn by trial and error. So what some of us are trying to do now is just like be more open with the other actors we know and just kind of be like, hey, like, what do you do in this situation? How do you handle this?
Yeah. And how about you still do some indie game work, right? I know you're an extra in the, I think it was the Benefactors animated, it was like an animation series that you and I were both extras in, actually.
Yeah, I do whenever, I have time. Like lately my schedule's been really busy, so I might not be able to do as much, but I do try to like, try out for things that I think look pretty cool, or especially if it's something a friend of mine is casting. Like I'm doing a really cool game for a YouTuber I follow, Matt McMuscles, and it's like this really like tough lady with a deep voice and a Russian accent, and it's like so opposite of what I normally get cast as, but it was so much fun.
Wow. Yeah, that would be nice to try something out of your normal range.
Yeah. I feel pretty lucky. Like, of course, I have a typecast. Most actors do, and I actually love my typecast. But at the same time, I've gotten to play characters all over the map. Even like 2B, oddly enough, which is my most known role, was opposite of like what I'm usually cast for. So it's funny because everyone's all like, "Oh, she only does one voice. She only plays one character type," as is common with literally every actor because we all get typecast, and then 2B comes out and they're like, "Oh, wait, what?" That's something totally different.
That was a nice curveball.
Yeah.
So, what about three things? We're kind of wrapping up toward the end here. I like to go over three-ish things that people could or could not do. And in this case, I wanted to go over maybe three-ish things that you think would really have helped your career in the beginning. And of course, like you said, the climate may have changed since then. But what about three things would you say would really help people in their career to grow, to avoid getting discouraged, to make themselves better actors?
Um, so I guess like one of the things that, I wish that I was better at, and now I'm like getting pretty solid at it, but it took just so long because I just didn't really know how to do it, is like the whole business and marketing aspect of voiceover, like everything that's not, the actual process of going into the booth and acting. Stuff like scheduling, like managing your schedule and times and stuff. Knowing how to like ask for rates so that you don't get taken advantage of, because I mean it's something that actors are still dealing with to this day, because clients keep trying to drive rates down lower and lower because they're like, well, I can go to this place and find an actor who will accept it and stuff. And so I think it's like really important for when there are like established standards in place for actors to stand together and be like, no, we're not going to work for this rate, sort of thing. And it's different. Like I'm not talking about like indie games and stuff like that, because I know that's kind of like a different thing where sometimes people are like, I'm just making this game for fun. I don't really have a lot of budget, but this. So it's not like that, but like things where like actual companies are trying to, you know, price actors out of the standards that they've worked long to set. Um, and I guess another thing would be, hmm, like trying to think of some good examples. Sorry. Just like really knowing how to be on top of communication, like responding to emails like quickly, just always making sure that your clients can get in touch with you within a reasonable time frame, making sure you're on top of your deadlines. I mean, these are things that I still struggle with. I think everybody does. It's like whatever tools that you need to help you, like Google Calendar is something that saved my life, basically. Getting push notifications on my phone for like my business account. Um, and I think another thing that I wish that I had done better is it can be kind of hard when you are younger and you're doing like a ton of stuff on the internet, and maybe you're not really thinking about what you're saying, or you're not really, maybe you burn bridges with people or this and that. And most things are not too hard to bounce back from. Like if you learn and you try to be a good person overall, I think there's a lot of room for forgiveness and repairing things down the line. But it's like, when I look back on like some of the drama that I was involved in when I was younger, just to be brutally honest, like whether in voice acting communities or production communities or what have you, it's like I'm just like, wow, like why was I such an idiot? I should have just like kept my mouth shut, just try to be like easy to get along with. And I mean, there's a time and a place for fighting your battles, but knowing when to fight those battles I think is important. And it's something that I didn't learn until I was much older. So there you go, brutally honest.
It's definitely a different frame of mind, I've noticed. How even regardless or irregardless of your mentality going in or your experience, it's it's not like going to a 9 to 5 job in the morning. It's not like you always have a stable income or you just show up and do the work. And of course, every job has its struggles and its ups and downs. But for the most part, if you show up to a stable job, you just kind of put in the work you're given and that's where it goes. Whereas as a voice actor, you have to make your own jobs every single day. So it's a different frame
And
of mind.
sometimes you have to go above and beyond. And there are certain things like my mentality, I guess, used to be unconsciously, well, hey, if I'm showing up and I'm doing the work and I'm taking direction, like that's good, right? And then it's like, no, it's all those other little things that you don't think about, like, how maybe like showing appreciation for your clients, like going out of your way for this or that, maybe going out of your way for the other actors, and like, I don't know, there's just like there's a lot of stuff, like a lot of unwritten rules and little things that you just don't really know and don't think about until someone points them out. And it's like, I like to think I'm constantly learning.
You never stop learning. It's a crazy career where you're constantly not just getting better at the same things, but learning new things, even no matter how
Yeah.
old you are, how experienced you are.
And I think that's really important too whenever you feel stuck, because I know I've been there many times, and I hear it from other people constantly. They're like, "Okay, I feel like I'm not booking anymore. I feel like my career is going nowhere. Like what am I doing wrong?" And it's like it's very easy to just stay in that mindset, which is kind of unhealthy, and especially if you start comparing yourself to other people, which we all do because we're human. Um but it's good to kind of look at, okay, how can I improve my auditioning skills? Like pick something to work on or whatever. And it might not even be anything you're doing wrong. It might just be, hey, there's not a lot of jobs right now this season for your voice type or whatever. But, I try to keep in mind that whole constructive thing, 'cause it's so easy, especially with social media, to look at how everyone else is doing, especially if they're younger than you, and feel like you're falling behind or you're hitting a wall. But I think being like, okay, what can I constantly be doing to work on my craft is the most constructive way to handle that.
And on the flip side, would you be able to discuss three ish things that voice actors might be making mistakes with? Like maybe they're trying a marketing tactic that doesn't work, or an attitude that isn't good, or relying too much on one tactic while ignoring others, or unprofessional behavior, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I have actually quite a few full-on articles about this on the VAC, but one of the ones that I recommend people read is about professional mindsets for auditions, because I know a lot of people who, for example, when they're very new, they don't follow directions for auditions because everybody wants it differently. So they want the files labeled a different way, they want it in a different format. Maybe they want you to put this thing in the subject line. Maybe they say do multiple takes, or some say don't do multiple takes, some say do it but put it in a separate file. And it's like it's just really important to show that you can read and follow the instructions. And just knowing how to, like, obviously you don't want to leave a bunch of unedited like space in your recordings, or if you mess up or something, you want to go back and delete that and turn in like a clean file. So just like that kind of stuff. You don't want to obviously like follow up and be like, oh, did you get my audition? What'd you think of it? Can you send me a review? Oh no, why didn't you cast me or whatever? Like,
Yeah.
just like that kind of stuff. Like, you want to be submitting for as many things as you can reasonably fit, but you don't want to focus too much on, well, I really want to get this one thing and I'm going to be devastated if I don't. I mean, hey, even like two things I auditioned for recently, I was like really upset because I didn't get them, and I thought I did great on my auditions. I really wanted to book them, but hey, it doesn't, it also doesn't always mean you were bad. Sometimes it just means, hey, this other person was a better fit for this particular role than you are. And that's fine. So kind of just like, just putting as many opportunities as you can out there for yourself. And, you know, you throw 100 things at the wall and one of them will stick, right? Um, and then also, I know I talk about this a lot in my guides and stuff, but so many people focus on like, I want to learn to do different voices and different accents, and oh, I can do these impressions of these characters. And all those things are tools that you can use that are helpful. I'm not discrediting that whatsoever. There's a lot of stuff like I started off, just copying voices that I heard on shows and games or whatever, and I learned to do a lot of voices as a result. But you really don't want to forgo that acting foundation, because it's all about portraying the character. And I know I sound like I'm just like plugging my articles, but it's like this is like the TLDR version. And then if anyone's interested in reading more about this stuff, I do have an article about an acting method that I find helpful for like getting into the character's head and stuff, because A voice is a voice. You can train your voice to do things, but if you can't believably portray a character, you're probably not going to get cast. They also know that if you're experienced, they can direct you to do things slightly different. So, yeah.
Good acting foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
And,
hear. Yeah.
and like one more thing. I lose track of which number it was. I think this is third. Cold reading. Really, really, really important because I know a lot of people who maybe they look at audition sites and they're like, well, okay, it's going to take me like 30 minutes to an hour to like prepare and like make notes and do all this stuff. When you're in the booth, you don't know what you're working on. You don't get to study the script in advance. You don't get to, you have to make choices like quickly. And, sometimes they'll redirect you, but you have to come in right out of the gate with a solid choice. So I think, and we all trip up, don't get me wrong, but if you're to the point where you're comfortable looking at the words on the page or on the screen in front of you and being able to deliver a solid first take, which then you can be redirected off of, or knowing, hey, here's like two variations that are kind of different, but both are viable of this take sort of thing. That's going to be really helpful if you start booking work in person.
The cold reading is a good point. We don't often hear too many people address the cold reading part. We hear about preparation, of course, which is important when you have the time and the space to do it. But I think the ability to see a line and instantly have something good ready, even if it needs to be redirected, to still have something to go on that makes directors go, wait a minute, let's try another one of that.
Yeah, that happens all the time because I book a lot of mobile games, for example, for like the overseas markets and stuff. And a lot of times it's like maybe even the people directing me might not have a ton of info about what the project is. Obviously, like, we don't know, the games aren't even released over here, like that sort of thing. I can't do any research on my character. So they'll just be like, hey, we need you to come in and do a game. So I'll go in and they might give me like 4 or 5 different characters to play. And, I have to kind of come up with unique like personalities for each of those characters, look at that line because that'll be the first time I'm seeing that line or seeing that character, and get it.
Yeah.
Obviously when you're playing a character that you're spending a really long time with, like you're doing a full 26 episode anime series, or like, obviously when we worked on Nier, that was a lot of dialogue, so I really got to like grow with 2B and kind of like, really get into her mind as a character. But for shorter stuff, it might just be one and done. So the cold reading is super important.
Well, I think that's about all we have for today. So, that being the case, I want to thank you very heartily, Kira, for coming on this show.
Thank you. Any fun questions or like last minute? I feel like that was like a heavy like thing that I just gave over the last hour.
Sure, we
But
can.
like,
What's your
I'll
favorite video
know
game?
like, oh, favorite video game, like, well, I mean, Nier Automata is really up there, but I feel like that's biased. So in terms of stuff that like I had no involvement in, the Guilty Gear series is something I really love.
Ooh, I need to get into that. I'm trying to get into more fighting games.
Oh, it's a wonderful fighting game. I mean, it's difficult, but it'll like like you can handle any fighting game after you learn to play Guilty Gear, I think.
Is it very
Plus, it's got
technical
a
or is.
ton of classic rock references.
Oh, yeah. Is it a very technical fighting game or something
Yeah,
anyone could get into?
yeah. I mean, it is technical, but like, there's something to be said. Like, you can just go in there, mess around, look at each character's like command inputs and stuff, and be like, okay, I'm just gonna like practice this stuff, play against a computer, have fun. Like, you can like start like that if you want.
Hmm. I'll add that to my incredibly growing list of things to look into. What about
Yes.
a what about a favorite animal?
Animal is obviously cats and kittens.
Very
I'm very
appropriately.
much a cat lady, yes.
Favorite food?
Sushi burritos.
Sushi. Sushi's a big one. I feel like a lot of people, especially of our generation, I think, have a kind of an affinity for sushi.
Hmm.
And for those who are listening, go, oh, sushi. It's a little bit different from sashimi. That is very different from sashimi.
Well,
Sushi.
and my favorite food, I mean, I like all kind of sushi, but my favorite in specific is sushi burritos, which they do at food trucks here. And if you guys ever go to Anime Expo, you can try out the food trucks that have them. They're super good.
Hmm.
I'm also like a huge coffee addict, but I mean, my Instagram name is Killer Coffee Queen. I think everyone knows I'm like super coffee, coffee, coffee all the time.
Favorite drink? Coffee. Good to know.
Yes.
And any other, I think you mentioned sewing and the like, but any other hobbies that you're into when you're not voice acting?
Makeup for sure, like gaming when I get a chance. Cosplay, music. I'm like really, really into classic rock, especially like 70s and 80s stuff. My favorite artist is David Bowie. I think anybody knows that who follows me online because I'm very vocal about my love for David Bowie. But yeah.
I think that's about all we have. Thank you very much, Kira. It was good getting to talk with you and hear your perspective on things and how you got where you are.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, well, that being the case, I think I'll sign off. I salute you, Kira.
All right. Well, you have a good rest of your evening, and thank you so much for taking the time to interview me.
And thank you so much for taking the time to be interviewed. So,
All right. Well,
you have a good
have a
evening,
good
Kira.
night. Yeah.